Talks with Damon on location in San Francisco with the amazing writer, inspiration leader, Race Bannon. And this is also a very special episode of Tub Talks. This is number 200.
That's pretty amazing.
It is. I'm having a hard time believing it.
I like being number 200.
You are number 200. Probably not the first time you've been the 200th of something.
Well, I don't know. Maybe.
Maybe. This would be a special distinction in your vast, wonderful history.
I'm happy to be here too.
Oh, thank you for being here, Race. It means a lot. It really means a lot. I think people who watch this show may know Race, and if you don't, you're going to get to know why. Part of the reason why we get to have so much liberation, pleasure, community, and play is because of your efforts. You have been contributing to this community for 50 years, and I want people to understand how so much of us are beneficiaries of that without even really knowing it.
I often say one of my greatest attributes is I simply stuck around.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's, before we get to that, Race, I want to ask you, what do you like most about your body?
Oh, what do I like most about my body? I actually like a lot about my body. I'm going to just pick one, and that's my butt.
Yeah.
Because even though I have a 71-year-old butt, so it's not quite what it used to be, every now and then a friend will say, oh my God, you have the butt of a 30-year-old. You have the butt of... And I'm going to take that. So I'm going to say my butt. I assume my dancer background and my gymnast background in my youth stuck with me long enough to give me a butt.
It is a good butt. It is a good butt.
I'm happy with it.
Wow. So 71.
Yeah, this month. I'll be 71 shortly.
What does that feel like for you to be on the edge of 71?
You know, every decade has been an experience. You know, you turn 20, you turn 30, you turn 40, which is a big one, 50, 60. None of them really hit me. Then I turned 70 and I went, wow, that's a number. I don't feel 70. I don't think I act 70, whatever that is. But I felt it. I mean, it was a tangible internal feeling of, wow, I'm 70. That's kind of old. I mean, so ever since I was 16, people have asked, how long are you going to live? Or what do you want to do? And I've always said, oh, I'm going to live to 100. I've said that since I was 16.
Wow.
So I'm going for that. We'll see. But I'm doing pretty good for 71.
I mean, to be 71 and to be an active, vibrant part of our community is kind of historically unprecedented.
There are certainly people that stick around.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm outing my friend Cleve Jones by saying he's someone that has stuck around and we're about the same age. I think he's younger than me, and he never lets me forget that, that he's younger than me by a little bit. And I could name other people that have certainly stuck around and kept doing whatever they're doing.
However, and where I feel the thing that distinguishes you, at least in my view, is the way you express yourself, the way you write articles, the way you give interviews, the way you stand for so much affirmative, sex positive pleasure and play, and continuing to learn and evolve about that and share new ideas with us throughout time.
Yeah,
I think you're very unusual in that. Maybe not the only way. I think you're very unique in this regard.
I will take that. Whether I am unique or not, I will accept that. I certainly love to write. I love to communicate. I love to organize. I love to speak. And I hope I keep learning.
Yeah.
I just wrote a piece coming back from a weekend that I was at where there were a lot of trans men mixed in with the cis gay men, and how comfortable that was, and how easy it was, and how non-dramatic it was. And my 30-year-old self probably would look at my 71-year-old self and go, wow, you've grown, just because I would have been not uncomfortable, but not used to that when I was very young. And I hope that I never stop learning and accepting and growing and trying to be better. Is that a good word? Yeah.
Your interest and curiosity and learning and growing and being better. I think it's a wonderful model for how we can age chronologically and cognitively. right? I think where people get old, and this has nothing to do with chronology, is when people say, I know who I am and I'm set in my ways and I don't want to learn anything new and I don't want to open my mind or my heart or my legs to people I don't know or people I'm not familiar with, and just kind of shut down. And I've seen people do that.
Yeah.
In their 30s, 40s, just say, get very sedentary and rigid in their practice.
I always say, I've said for years, age if you must, but don't get old. And that's kind of my motto.
Yes.
I'm gonna age because none of us gets off this planet alive, so we all age. But I really don't want to get old. So I hope that constantly giving myself new experiences and learning new things will keep me that way.
Beautiful. Now let's go back a little ways, if I may.
Sure.
About 50 years ago, you were living in Los Angeles.
Oh, let's see, 50 years ago.
Early 70s.
No, I would have been
here.
Let's see, so what year that? So we're talking
74, 75.
I was living in Chicago.
Okay.
Yes, I'm born and raised in Chicago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought you was a sort of an LA, San Francisco person.
The reason you probably thought that is that I went from Chicago to New York. Then in 1980, I moved from New York to Los Angeles, and I was in LA for 14 years.
Okay.
So, and honestly, my public profile in queerdom and kink and leather and all that kind of blossomed a lot after 1980. And so that's probably why a lot of people think I'm from.
That's right. Okay. So you were part of the early Guard who created or co-created or founded a leather community in the early 1970s. Fair or not fair? Accurate or not accurate?
I'm going to not use the word founded.
Okay.
But I would certainly say I was one of the people who was intimately involved with the community and therefore was part of its growth.
Okay.
I was bartending in a sort of leather kink bar underage in Chicago. So I mean, I've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah.
So I will say part of it, but I think founded would be overstating it.
Okay. So these places, the community, the bars, the gatherings existed 50 years ago. This is not just something that people have stumbled onto recently. Yeah. This is part of a tradition.
Yeah.
How did you learn? How did you stumble on? How did you come into this community, into the leather kink community?
By accident, sort of. I living in Chicago, I've always been very, very sexual all my life, even as a child. We won't go into all of that. But the moment I turned 16, I got a car, and I was being raised at that time in the southern suburbs of Chicago. And I immediately started to go into the city in search of men. And I didn't know exactly what I was doing, but I was absolutely in search of men. And let's just say I was relatively successful. And then...
at 16, how did you know where to go?
Okay, so this is gonna be a little bit of an odd story. I figured out that in the back of the Chicago Tribune, in the apartment wanted ads, and the roommate wanted ads, I figured out the gay code. When people wanted a gay roommate, this is gonna sound crazy. When they wanted a gay roommate, I figured it out. I don't know why. And so I would call these guys up and say, I would like to be your roommate. Can I come look at the apartment? And I would, and probably a good half to 3/4 of the time I'd end up having sex with them.
Oh my God.
Now, in their defense, I looked much older. I grew facial hair. They probably thought I was of legal age.
That sounds great. So what was the code? What was the secret?
I don't remember. I don't remember if it was something stupid like Love Show Tunes or
Friend of Dorothy?
Friend of Dorothy.
Maybe, because that was a thing people used to say.
Maybe I figured that out. I don't know. But I did figure it out.
It's very
and I did that a number of times.
Very clever.
And then...
okay, so you go and you pursue sexual experiences.
I would.
Through these real estate roommate men.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, and then did they help you learn like which bars or how to build communities to go to?
It was sex and go. And I just obviously never called them back about the room. It's a little underhanded, but at 17 years of age, I stumbled into first a bar in Chicago called the Glory Hole, which I ended up working at. And then the second bar I walked into was the Gold Coast, which at the time was one of, if not the preeminent leather bars in the United States, in the world.
How did
Yeah.
So at that time, it was the preeminent.
Pretty much. Chuck Renslow owned it, same
Uh-huh.
guy that started International Mr. Leather, same guy that
Ooh.
founded the Leather Archives, same guy that did a lot of things.
And
And,
again, how did you know? Or was it just totally by accident? You
that
found
was-
this place.
I sniffed it out. I don't know why. I went to the
Wow.
Glory Hole by accident, kind of. I said, this looks like it might be a gay bar.
Uh-huh.
And then maybe somebody there mentioned it, and it was within walking distance. So I walked there, and I walked into the Gold Coast, and it was a sea of men in mostly Levi. Everyone assumes it was all dripping in leather back then. That's actually not true. That's why we called them Levi leather bars back then, not just leather bars. And so I was a Levi guy. I was in Levi jacket, boots, jeans, and walked in, and it was home. The moment I saw these men, and I had no porn prior to that to reference. I wasn't looking at magazines much. I just knew these men were where I wanted to be. And it was my home bar along with the Glory Hole for a very long time.
How would you describe the mood? Or like, were people friendly? Were they unfriendly? Was it sort of cliquey?
So here I am, 17,
Yeah.
10-year gymnast, embarking on a dancing career. I was cute.
You still are.
Kind of, but I was really cute then. I was a little buffed.
Uh-huh.
And kind of knew how to adopt the kind of hyper-masculine exterior that attracted them.
So you quickly learned and picked up on the cues and just kind of
Immediately.
fit in.
Yeah, immediately. And
What
yeah.
did sex mean back then? Because sometimes we say sex and that's such an umbrella term. Was anal sex usually a goal or on the menu, or did sex mean
Anal sex was on the menu, yes. Oral
Okay.
and anal mostly. I ended up going into a bathhouse underage also. Thank goodness these places are no longer in business because I'm outing them. And so I walked into a bathhouse, and one of my first scenes there was I fisted a guy. He walked me through how to fist him.
Okay, so he showed you.
Oh yeah, I didn't know how to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was that like for you?
It was trippy because I met him walking into the bathhouse, and he was a sexy little leather man with chaps on and a vest and very good looking. And he was hobbling, and I looked down, and his foot was covered with grease. And I went, and he was on his heels so he wouldn't get grease on the carpet, right? And he's hobbling, and he goes, he says, I just foot fucked somebody, and I'm on my way to the showers to get this all off. And I went, okay, that was a little shocking. And about an hour later, this same guy and I ended up hooking up, and that's when he taught me how to fist him in a sling.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a moment. So I came out of the gate with the doors kind of just going. Yeah.
So throughout the 70s, then you were enjoying these experiences in Chicago.
In Chicago until 78. Yeah.
Was the identity Leatherman prevalent back then? Did you identify
Yes,
as Leatherman?
I identified as a Leatherman. We didn't use the word kink or kinkster much. True or not, Dave Rhodes credits me with coining the term kinkster. I'm not sure if it's true or not, but I'll take it.
All these people think you're a leader.
Yeah,
Damn them.
let them think that.
We're gonna end that right here.
I assume I plucked that out of the thin air, but whatever.
Wow.
But no, Leatherman. We never used kink, and in the United States, we never used fetish much because that's more of a European term. Certainly then, even now, it's much more of a European term. So yeah, Leatherman, and that was my identity right out of the gate. Yeah.
When it came to negotiating sexuality, how was that done? Was it something you would talk about at a bar? Like, this is what I want, this is what I don't want? Would you like go to someone's house and then say, this is what I want, this is what I don't want, this is what I do, what I don't do? How was all that
Yeah.
talked about?
Negotiation varied. Often the negotiation was look each other in the eyes. If they were wearing any signals, I wore my keys on the left typically.
Mhm.
I tended to be mostly top and dom, even for many, many, many years. I'm very versatile in a switch now, but and often it was 30 seconds of words exchanged. Can you take me home and fuck me? Okay, sure. Do you like this, that, or that? Sure, yeah. I don't remember uttering even the concept of a safe word till I was probably in my 20s, somewhere in my 20s. But everybody was very respectful. I never had a bad scene. I never had, now admittedly, I was usually top and dom and in a little bit more control, so maybe that was it. But I was a neophyte dom and top early on, so they were experienced bottoms walk. They were teaching me. Even if they didn't realize they were teaching me. So, but honestly, all of them were pretty respectful and lovely and kind, and kind of showed me the way really early. And I'm pretty grateful. I did not have any bad experiences.
Wow.
Maybe that's just sheer luck, too.
You know, I mean, people can have bad experiences.
Yeah.
Certainly, some experiences when we're young are traumatizing.
Yeah.
But a lot of gay men have a lot of experiences, sometimes in childhood, that are not traumatizing, that
Yeah.
are not scarring, that actually they talk about as having enriched their lives today. And I think in America, anyway, we don't make a lot of room for that conversation.
Yeah.
That not all underage sex is bad or scarring or damaging. But it's hard for people to talk about that openly because of the narrative out there.
Oh, absolutely. And I fully understand the caution around that narrative. I am one of those people who, when I would have physical intimacy with my friends, my same age friends, when I was younger, and I was doing it very young, I never really had a bad experience with it at all.
Yeah.
Just didn't. It was, because it was usually friends and we'd be playing around. And I did the now, which was not a correct narrative to use this verbiage at all. But back then, remember when it was, I used to play cowboys and Indians.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would, it was always me tying up the cowboys. That was the idea. So even at 9, 10, I was tying cowboys to trees.
You enjoy the energy.
I loved it.
Exciting.
Yeah. And, but I never had really bad experiences, I have to say.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I had better and worse. Things that resonated and things that didn't.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't say I had any situation that was dangerous or traumatizing or that I felt in any way emotionally or physically damaged. So and that was pretty self-aware. One thing about being in the leather community early is even though they didn't have a lot of formalized, this is negotiation, this is it, it was far less formalized then.
Mm-hmm.
The ethos of the culture was still, you don't hurt somebody in a bad way. You make sure that everyone's having a good time, that kind of thing. So perhaps that was lucky that was the community I came out in.
Yeah. Something I get asked a lot, the Tough Talk audience asks me about, is that sex in the 70s. In the 21st century, for people who bottom, there's such an extreme fear of shitting. And often people who had sex in the 70s were like, it just wasn't something people worried or fretted about all that much. Do you remember, you were mostly a top, but do you remember your partners worrying about this, fretting about this, shit ever coming into this? If you were fucking or fisting or...
It was inevitable. And I don't remember anybody officially douching, except for the fisting community sometimes did. And I say sometimes, not always.
Nice.
But the fucking community, I don't remember anybody doing that back then. It was kind of considered it came with the territory. If you hit dirt, you wiped it off and went on.
Right.
And that's what you did.
It wasn't a big deal.
It was not a big deal.
Yeah.
And I actually think that maybe we've done a disservice in some way by being so hyper-focused on incredible, perfect cleanliness.
Yeah.
That it probably stops a lot of people's spontaneity.
Yes.
It probably stops a lot of scenes that shouldn't be stopped. It probably concerns a lot of bottoms more than it should. So I think maybe we've done a disservice by emphasizing that so much.
I think so. Again, it's not something I would prefer, but I feel like the extreme fear that bottoms sometimes go through, and some have talked about this on the show over the 200 episodes. It's like, okay, if you are in a play space, if you're in a group and you have an accident, you're going to get ostracized. You're going to be seen, like they're going to see you differently. They may not invite you back to that play space. And I think that kind of shaming and stigmatizing is very unhealthy.
Can I name somebody's name in the
Yeah.
So I was at a play party that my friend Ray Dalton was producing, and called Fornication, and he had invited me, and I came. And I remember a young man having an accident.
Yeah.
And the poor guy was absolutely mortified. He was ready to bolt. And Ray took him by the arm, put his arm around him and said, "Come with me, young man." And they went to the bathroom, they figured it out, they cleaned it up, they did whatever. And the kid came back into the party and had a great time.
Wow.
I thought that was an absolutely masterful handling of what could have otherwise been a bad situation.
Yeah.
So that kid's now not traumatized if he has an oops, because he might have had an oops and for the rest of his life been traumatized. So the way Ray handled it was such textbook as far as I was concerned. That's just one example of how it does not need to traumatize someone or bother someone so much if we normalize it a little bit more.
Right. Wonderful. Wonderful. Okay. This is, again, the insights, the experience, and how you seem to approach everything from such a humane, compassionate point of view. I just always appreciate that about you and your voice and your work.
It's my father.
Yeah?
My father was a saint walking the planet. Yeah, he was. He was one of the most genuinely decent human beings that's ever walked the planet. Yeah. And he taught me very young. I remember, let's talk about the 60s, and I'm being raised by my father, and he was a very high-powered corporate accountant person, partner with a big firm, and world famous, actually. He had famous movie stars as clients and all this kind of stuff. But very unassuming man. And I remember him saying, I met his secretary who was black. Having a black secretary in a major world-renowned accounting firm for one of the main partners was not really very common. Let's just put it that way. And I remember my dad interviewing her and going to bat, saying, no, and some of the other partners were kind of pushing back, saying, "Are you sure you want to hire her?" Obviously, racism was rearing its head. And he said, "But she's the best qualified for the job." She turned out to be the best secretary in the entire firm. Wow. No surprise. She was incredibly devoted to my father for giving her that chance when some of those other people in the firm wouldn't. And that's the kind of dad I had. He modeled good behavior, holding doors, being polite. Don't judge people by their exteriors. My dad was devout Catholic. Don't judge people by their religions or not religions. He never wore his Catholicism on the sleeve, but even though he was very devout, he really taught me how to be decent. And so I think if I have any decency in me, I want to give credit to my father.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
You give him props.
Yeah, he was a good guy.
Yeah. It makes a difference.
It really does. And I was an only child, so.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Here's to the dads out there, role model and mentor.
He was a good one.
When do you remember first hearing about GRID or the gay cancer?
Los Angeles, back to Los Angeles. Okay. So there was a young man working at a leather toy shop. I don't know how to describe it. And he was one of the first cases in Los Angeles, and I knew him. Didn't know him well, but I knew him. So he was amongst the first few cases diagnosed in Los Angeles.
Do you remember what year that was?
I want to say 84. Is it 83?
84.
83, 82.
Well, the New York Times, when did they started covering this in 1981?
Yeah.
I know from San Francisco there were cases here in the 70s.
I was there for a year, and then I moved in 80, so it could have been 81. My memory is a little bit.
That's okay. Okay, so what did you think when you started hearing about this?
I went into community mode quickly.
Yeah.
I became Mr. Safer Sex. We don't use safe sex anymore. We use safer. But back then we used that.
Safe sex was the term.
Yeah, it was the term.
I know.
I adopted that immediately myself.
How did you learn what safe sex was at that point?
Because kinky people knew how to continue to have sex even if they couldn't do the same kinds of insertive sex they had done before. And if they didn't do insertive, to wrap it up. And so because I was so mired in the leather and kink, to use today's vernacular, and highly sexual community, even apart from kink and leather, you figure that out fast if you want to keep doing anything.
Yes.
And so I volunteered for the first safe sex organization in Los Angeles. I believe it was called LA Cares. They had to change their name later because another organization had the same name, it turned out. and began to go to bars and pass out condoms and do all that kind of stuff.
So you just jumped into gear in terms of helping save lives, in terms of serving in the early 80s.
And immediately, it was also 1980 when I started to become more high profile in the leather community, including teaching and speaking and that kind of thing. So, which I had not really done much prior. And so I incorporated a lot of the safer sex stuff into my, BDSM or other kinds of classes and workshops or speeches or whatever I did.
Wow.
So I was a very early proponent. And even though, this is probably moving ahead, but even though I was Mr. Safer Sex from the get-go, and I was exclusively pretty much at the top, I would bottom maybe once every 2 years. I was one of those people. Now I do it a lot. But I seroconverted anyway, even though I didn't even not use a condom with my own partner until we moved here to San Francisco in 1994. I was always having rap sex. So I was just in the habit and did it. So clearly I seroconverted long before I started to adopt safer sex. And my doctor said, we know it's been around a long time. Knowing your history, you probably acquired it perhaps years ago.
Wow.
And
when were you diagnosed?
Mid 80s.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was that like to learn of that diagnosis then?
It was tough because a lot of people I knew died. And my first partner, who I was not with at the time, but we were still super, super close, died.
Let's say his name.
Kevin Lockwood.
Thank you.
He was an amazing human being, one of my 14 years of bliss. And we mostly separated because I wanted to go to New York to be a dancer, and he's from New York, didn't want to go there, so he moved to LA. And we separated mostly for practical reasons, not necessarily emotional. Then we ended up having separate relationship experiences and then kind of sort of coming together again. So people were dropping dead left and right, and we had to go into care mode. I was okay at that. I think I was young enough that I wasn't as good at care mode as I should have been. I would be much better today. But you go into care mode, and we talk about the lesbians taking care of us. It's true. And I remember dealing with a lot of it, and my lesbian friend, whose name I can't remember, which is terrible, in Los Angeles, saying, "Oh no, honey, don't worry, I got it. I'll take care of it." And off she went to my friend's house to take care of him. And so props to the lesbians.
Yeah.
So I had about 48 hours of oh fuck, and then I remember clearly saying to someone I was very close to, I'm not going to let it get to me. I'm not going to die. I'm not going to do it. And I turned out to be a very slow progressor, which is what they tended to categorize us at. So I didn't even go on meds until I moved to San Francisco in the mid-90s. Yeah, they tracked my viral load every 3 months. I just never spiked.
So you were not significantly sick or ill with AIDS?
Ever. Yeah, I was very lucky. And that's genetics. I also wasn't a big drinker. I didn't use a lot of substances. I tended to work out and take care of myself. But I also know people who did all those things and got really, really sick and died quickly. So a lot of it is, again, Dad, thanks for the genetics. I think it's my genetics more than anything.
Wow.
Yeah, lucky. Very lucky.
When you started on meds, are we talking antiretrovirals or before that?
No, I waited until the good meds were around.
Oh, okay.
And we went to undetectable. I've been undetectable since I've ever been on meds.
Wow.
And actually with quite a few T cells. I have more T cells than many healthy people. So good doctors, I take care of myself and, do what they tell me to do and it worked.
So you were about 30 when you were diagnosed.
Mm-hmm.
That's more than 50% of your life. I've been living with HIV.
Yeah, it is.
Did you ever imagine we'd be here having this conversation at such
yes,
a run?
Honestly,
you did imagine.
I did, even though a lot of my friends would say, it's a death sentence. Back then it was considered a death sentence. I just never bought into it personally. I often didn't state that to anyone else, so I didn't make them feel like, well, you're sick, so it's somehow your fault. I didn't want to do that. So, which of course it wasn't. It was just, I kept personally, except with a few intimate friends that I would tell, I said, no, I'm not going to let it get me. I'm not going to die. I'm not going to get sick. And a very close friend, a psychiatrist who had a lot of HIV positive patients, said that he could track attitude and how quickly someone did or didn't get sick. That not perfectly, but he did notice that a lot of his patients that did well long term had a very, very good upbeat attitude. So I'm hoping that's maybe what kept me, along with maybe good genetics.
Wow.
Yeah, so, yeah.
So you moved to San Francisco?
1994.
1994, okay.
I was in LA for 14 years.
Were you, as a person living with HIV, did you encounter stigma, discrimination, harsh bullshit from other people?
You know, I think in the beginning I did, certainly while still living in Los Angeles, I did. But most of the people I hung out with were leather and very sexually savvy people.
Yeah.
And they knew we could do other stuff and be fine. So I adapted pretty quickly, and most of the people around me adapted, but I had some rejection in the beginning. You know, sorry, I only play with negative guys, you know, that kind of thing. And, you know, back then I kind of get it. Today with undetectable and PrEP and everything else, I don't get it. But I kind of got it. But luckily my crowd figured it out, and we just adapted. And I didn't face a lot of personal stigma.
That's beautiful, and such a testament as well, I think, to the leather community, as you're describing, was sex positivity, fact-based sexual health decisions.
Yeah.
And also realizing that so many of the activities that can bring one pleasure and connection had nothing to do with anything that would put someone at risk of HIV.
I have said more than once that I may be alive in large part because I was a leather man and came out in the leather community. It's very possible that series of chance events kept me alive. Because if I had been in a less informed community, a less savvy community, a less adaptive community and creative community, the Kinksters are very creative, maybe I wouldn't be alive. I don't know. But it's a possibility. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so you moved here, San Francisco, early 1990s.
Yep, mid-94.
Mid-94. How did you find, or what did you notice about the leather community here? What did you think of the leather community? How did you experience that here?
So I've been pretty deep in leather in Chicago and then New York.
Did you already know everybody?
No, I didn't.
You already
I described myself as a lone wolf back then.
Okay. Can you say,
very-
I've seen you write about this. Can you describe what lone wolf means?
I would go off to sex venues, cruise bars, sex clubs, parties, whatever, mostly as a lone wolf solo.
Yeah.
And most of my play was with people that I probably didn't have a lot of ongoing play with. Some one-off, some people I would just play with at parties, some people I would just play with at the baths. But when the lone wolf part of it is, I never was a joiner of any sort. None of the leather clubs appealed to me. None of the gay clubs appealed to me. I was very active in political stuff. I remember helping organize an anti-Anita Bryant in Chicago. You know, so I was, and I'd be in a parade and that kind of stuff. But in terms of leather and sexual community, I never really did anything until Los Angeles when I moved there. And there was a club, it is still there, called Avatar. And it's a gay men's leather club. And they had a party, and I showed up at this party. I forgot how I heard about it. And I played with somebody that I just saw there. And I don't know, about 2 hours, I'm very focused when I play. And about an hour and a half in, I noticed there's people watching. And I turned around and there were about 40 people watching. And finally, when I'm done, aftercare, which we didn't call aftercare then, but it's aftercare, and I'm bringing a guy down and we're having a good time. And finally, we're disengaged. One of them club members said, "Where did you learn to do that?" I said, "I don't know, I watch people." Because, no one took classes or anything back then. They did have classes there, and they asked me if I would teach. And that was the beginning of my public persona as a leatherman.
Wow.
Yeah, it was Avatar, which to this day is one of my favorite experiences being a member of Avatar.
Wow.
Yeah, I ended up becoming a member at some point.
Okay. So that was as a lone wolf in the 80s.
Yeah, until
that you became
Avatar and
recognized as a leader, as a teacher, as someone who could convey meaningful information for people.
Yep.
And then you came here and continued to navigate as a lone wolf.
Yeah, here I was less lone wolfy.
Okay.
I met a partner in Los Angeles. We moved here together. We've been together 34 years now.
Okay.
Awesome man. Mike is just the best. I was already pretty deep in leather. He and I were both members of Avatar at the time. We were going to big parties at Chicago Hellfire Club, and I was and still am a Chicago Hellfire Club member. So I clearly changed my stripes in terms of being a joiner, and that's why the lone wolf thing kind of flipped on its head, and I became much more public.
So what changed? I mean, in terms of you, I mean, I relate to this so much, and that's why I'm asking, like, you kind of navigated these different spaces in different cities as a lone wolf. I think of like as an individual.
Yeah, an individual. Yeah.
And then that shifted when you had with Mike, or that shifted when you.
No, it was pre Mike. So it was the experience with Avatar which changed me as a leather man, because all of a sudden I was teaching people things that I just knew how to do from years of doing it. And
so that's what shifted from being a lone wolf to...
And a club is a community. It's a bonded community. And Avatar was a lovely club to belong to. And I developed a lot of intimate sort of leather friends from it in ways that I hadn't prior. And then even prior to my partner, Mike, I met a man named Guy Baldwin during that era, mid-80s. And we became very close very quickly, and we became partners. And Guy was an extremely well-known person in the leather, far more better known than I was. So, and this is going to sound arrogant to say it this way, we kind of became known as a leather power couple. And because of his notoriety and fame, frankly, I rode on those coattails, and I think I then rose to it. But he was really the reason that I sort of got a very big public persona very quickly.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so with that persona, you started to be seen, recognized as a leader, as someone who is trusted with information and advice in the community.
And I would, I'd be on boards, and I'd help organize events, and I would help put on parties, and did lots of education, lots of teaching, lots of workshops, stuff
What
like
was
that.
that like? I mean, that sounds to me like a lot of responsibility.
I loved it. No.
Loved it. Was there any downside to being a leader and being involved in that way?
Very little. I admit I liked it. Maybe I liked the spotlight.
Yeah.
Having a theater background.
Uh-huh.
There's that. It was my way of contributing. I always sort of thought the community was where it was at, in whatever form you did it. I'm very big on community. This was my way of giving. And at the same time, I'll be honest, it elevated my status. And that sounds awful to say, but it did. In other words, people wanted to play with me even more. People wanted me to be involved with events even more. And I enjoyed that. So, and again, I think Guy was a lot of the reason that initially took off. I mean, I certainly went off in my own way, clearly, but if it wasn't meeting Guy, I'm not sure I would have had the same trajectory I had today. Yeah. And then, later after Guy, I met Mike, my current partner, who's outrageously supportive and lets me do whatever I want to do. It's kind of the secret to our relationship, is we let each other do whatever we want to do. And he was always very supportive and letting me, sort of pushing me forward into the limelight.
And again, I think that's just when we have a calling, when we walk into a step and say, yes, this feels like the right step. This is right for me, and I want to keep doing this. That's beautiful. Yeah. That's a wonderful thing. And sometimes, yes, there is a reward to that. There is a status from that. And sometimes that status is fun. Sometimes for some people that becomes a burden, where they feel like they have to live up to something, or they have to, then they feel like they have to stay constrained in the roles that people
I have learned that no is a complete sentence. That took a long time to develop that skill of saying no.
Yeah.
I also have a 72-hour rule. When anybody asks me to do anything, I say, let me know. I'll let you know in 3 days, because I always think about it.
Okay.
So I have felt less constrained by anything, because I usually say yes to what I want to do, and I say no to a lot of things that I don't want to do.
Love that. Yeah. So here in the 90s, and I was here at the same time, would you say the community, the leather community, again, continued to be a source of service, of education, of fundraising,
Yeah.
safer sex information?
Absolutely.
Okay. And would you say that it felt like community, like family?
Oh, absolutely. One of the things I love about San Francisco, and I do think some of it is due to the configuration of a 7-by-7 mile city, that we are all fairly close to each other, those that live within the city limits, or socialize and play within the city limits. We're a very, very strong community from the moment I was here. And I was coming here a lot in the 80s too, a lot. I loved the bathhouses, sex clubs, and the leather life here, and Folsom Street, and that whole thing, long before I ever moved here. So I've been coming here a long time, and I already kind of knew the city. We tried to move here early '94. I came and did a reconnaissance to try to get a place, and it didn't quite work out, and then we didn't move for another 6 months. So I always knew I wanted to be here after LA.
Wow.
Yeah, and my partner was from Southern California, and he was just ready for a change.
Wow.
Yeah.
So then San Francisco, toward the late 90s, started to see some changes. And in my opinion, it was not for the better. I say that selfishly, because I was kind of evicted and couldn't live here anymore.
Yeah.
So the first .com boom started happening in Silicon Valley in the late 90s, drastically changing a lot of things about quality of life around here.
Yep.
What did you see, or how did that, impact the community here?
It
When
did.
It started to become untenable or unaffordable for some folks.
Yeah, and in the interest of full disclosure, my bread and butter has always been in tech. I've mostly made my biggest money in tech. That was, with no disrespect to table servers, to restaurant servers, but I used to say it's my fancy waiting tables. It wasn't always my most passionate interest, but I was really fucking good at it.
But you were here before the tech thing happened.
I was doing tech in Los Angeles long before I moved here. I entirely self-taught and just got in.
So again, you self-taught. Another way you sought out experience, information, education, and took it on to learn yourself.
I was giving up being a dancer. I was living in LA. The decision in my head was, am I going to become a choreographer, teacher, or just give up dancing? And for whatever reason, I chose to give up dancing. Took a temp job, took a few, and then I ended up in a bank. One day at the bank, this computer arrived. And the vice president of the department, who was a lovely woman that was really kind to me, I said, so what's that? And she goes, we had budget and we had to use it or lose it. And we know we need a computer because everyone's doing computer stuff now. And I said, who's going to run it? And she goes, I don't know. I said, give me a week. And I poured through all the manuals, and I met with her, and she said, can you do a word processing document? Yes, I can. I type 100 words a minute, so that was a plus. I did a spreadsheet for her. I did a simple database for her. She goes, you're the manager of our computer department. And that's how I ended up in computers.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Just because I raised my hand and said, who's going to do that?
Wow.
Yeah, isn't that wild?
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So I think of you as someone who, even without knowing about your tech background, I think of you as someone who's often been an early adopter of technology to serve, to communicate, to try to bring people together. Do you remember, were you involved in the early AOL chat rooms in the 90s? Were you were kind of always on the beginning of that?
CompuServe was a big one. I probably interacted even more in CompuServe, although a lot of gay men did AOL. But both were pretty busy, and there would be some sort of kink BDSM leather chat rooms and things like that. I would be pretty involved.
So do you enjoy, what was that like for you to experience this community in such a different way when it was such a new thing?
It was new. The fact that I could talk to somebody in another country, like somebody in Europe or somebody in South Africa or just somebody in another state, that easily about topics that I could never have done except this way or maybe phone call, was a big deal. And so I think that is also when the kind of learning curve on leather, kink, gay men's public health, all these other things rose because people were all of a sudden sharing information digitally that previously had to be done face to face for the most part.
Wow.
Yeah, big deal.
It is a big deal. And again, I think an important point about technology is how it can be intentionally used to create community, education, fun, connection. It also clearly can be used in a very different way that we see a lot of. But in those early days, I think you were learning. It's like you could have these conversations with people. You could help people around the world learn and understand about kink, about BDSM, also about condoms and HIV prevention.
Oh, absolutely. I was really big on that very early and would always interject that into the conversation. Gay men's public health has always been, as you well know, an important part of my work. Leather kind of led to a lot of LGBTQ activism generally, a lot of gay men's public health activism sort of generally, and then later in life, even though we didn't have the verbiage for it as much back then, the polyamory non-monogamy community or realm. So leather was the entree into all of those things for me, but all of those are really important to me now. So yeah.
Now there's some people who say technology and the internet was the beginning of the ending of these sacred communities, of sacred spaces, of starting to water down what was so important and special about these communities. What do you say to that?
Yes and no. Yes, it can, especially if you don't use it as a tool. If you use it as your entire social life platform, it sucks because it's not really real life. And so the people that know how to use technology to then meet offline in real time, or go to an event in real time, or go to a class in real time, or use something they learn digitally online somehow to then go play better, have more fun, help others, whatever it might be, that's the way you use it. Unfortunately, some people replace their social life and their real-time life entirely with digital. People think I do too, because I'm fucking everywhere on the net. And I tell people I'm not a big scroller. I post, I get off. I look at my thing, I comment, I get off. And then in corporate world, for many years, I was a social media manager, partly at my company. I worked in information development. And part of what we did was that. So I always had social media on in the background. So people thought I was always online, because I kind of was, but for work reasons. So I've tried to use it as a tool for good and not go down the rabbit hole. The one exception to that is I will go down a TikTok rabbit hole in a hot minute. And so my rule is I have 10 minutes at night and I sit in bed. It's my little go to sleep thing. And I scroll TikTok for exactly 10 minutes and that's it. And because that I find a rabbit hole. That I will just keep doing this if I'm not careful. So I have to consciously blunt that. But the rest of it, I don't need to.
So you set rules then for yourself. Just follow those rules.
Yeah, and I do, at least for that one.
Yeah.
TikTok is the one.
What do you like about TikTok?
I think it is the algorithmically addictive. It just is. They figured out how to render to you exactly what you want to watch and see. So more so than maybe some of the other platforms, at least it seems that way. And so I learned early on that I have to be careful with that one. But the rest of them I can go on and off, and it's not a big deal. I was just at a 3-day gathering outside the city, about 3 hours north, with no internet or cellular, and it was lovely. It was lovely. We just put our phones away for 3 days and no communication with the outside world. It was great.
Wow.
I should do that more often.
Well, so that those levels of connection, in-person gatherings, they're still there.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people feel alienated by social media and ultimately feel lonely as a result of their engagement with social media. And that's why I try to remind people, you have to seek that out or show up in person. Or sometimes go somewhere where you may not feel 100% secure, but show up. Go to a gathering, sign up for a conference.
I used to tell people, so you know all these people online, have you ever asked somebody out for coffee?
Mm-hmm.
Just something really simple, not even a heavy lift.
Yeah.
And just said, just 30 minutes for coffee and just do it in real time. Yeah. I've suggested that to many people. I do it a lot. And I have conversed with people online for years and then finally got together for coffee or a drink at an event that we happened to be at or whatever. To me, that's using social media as a tool. It's good for disseminating information, it's good for organizing, and it's good for connections, but it just never replaces real-time engagement.
Right. Right. So that's also why I do this bathtub show and started this 4 years ago, and 200 episodes later it was starting at a time when vaccines were becoming readily available for COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone was sort of figuring out, what are we doing? Where are we going? What's going to happen? Is COVID here? Is it gone? We just didn't know.
Yeah.
And I just thought I wanted to have these in-person conversations again with real people, not virtual, not Zoom, no masks, no underwear. We're just like, let's get in the tub, let's get real again, because I missed that.
Yeah.
And wanted to remind people how valuable in-person, and often in-person naked, vulnerable conversations could be.
Yeah. Even during the COVID pandemic, I was lucky because I was a remote worker always, and I had been for years.
Yeah.
Even my office is about 50 miles away, but I rarely went into it. So I lucked out. I also, during the COVID, a friend of mine goes by Turbo, started a nonprofit, Queer Nightlife Fund, where we helped raise money to keep queer nightlife alive during the COVID pandemic, because most of those people working them were just cash people or didn't have a lot of money or whatever. And so we raised hundreds of thousands of dollars to keep them afloat until they could reopen their venues. And we met 5 nights a week for 4 months during the beginning of the COVID pandemic. So between work and that, I was completely entrenched in doing stuff, and it helped the pandemic. But very quickly, I learned I needed real people, and so I would call up friends and say, meet me at the corner of such and such. We'll talk for 20 minutes, 6 feet apart, whatever it takes. I don't care. I just need people. I also lived in the Castro, which helped. I could walk out my door and see people all the time, even during the pandemic.
Right.
They might mostly be masked, but I at least saw lots of people.
And was there still playing and sex and connection happening even during that time?
For me, no.
Okay.
I really didn't. I was one of those people that kind of shut it down. I just did. And I had a living situation that didn't allow for a lot of flexibility in that regard at the time. So I kind of shut that down and let my mental sex life take over a little bit for quite a while. But I still, saw a lot of my friends from the leather and the gay scene, and I still...
But how was that for you at this point in your life in 2020 to have to, after living your entire life open and to have to shift to this mode of really limiting or reducing any kind of touch or
I was
contact?
shocked that I was able to do it relatively easily. But I think it's because I just kept every waking hour involved in something. 8 hours of work, 2-3 hour meetings 5 nights a week for the nonprofit. Occasionally I'd get together with friends outdoors and we chat, and that kept me alive socially. I'm a pretty good adapter, and I adapted pretty quickly. That said, it was fucked up. It was totally fucked up, and it took me a while to jumpstart my sexuality after it. It really did.
What was that like to jumpstart after that? What did that look like?
Getting back into the habit of having sex regularly and not necessarily just with one person.
I mean, were you feeling afraid of COVID at that point, or was it just...
I think it was just habit. I think it was just, I got into this groove of less socializing, less sex, almost none, for a while. And so when I came out of the pandemic, or we began to come out, and we began to adapt, I remember having sex with masks on with somebody that said, yeah, I want to get together, but I said, that's fine. I'm good with that. I'm kinky. I said, I can give you a leather mask to put over it and it'll be hot. Yeah. So, I remember one guy, I put this flat leather thing over his regular mask that he had. So it looked just like he had a leather gear on. And we did this entire scene, and he goes, oh, that was really great. And he hadn't had sex in like 150 days or something at that point. And so he was just really, so I adapted to that, but it was a little trepidatious for whatever reason. And then, I got over it. thank goodness. But I'm kind of back at it. But yeah, it took a while. It took a while, and it took a conscious pushing me out, going, no, go do this. You're just out of the habit of doing it.
Within yourself.
Within myself.
To yourself.
Yeah, saying my self-talk.
Okay. So again, that part of you that's an individual, you know, in many ways, I think, in learner, I was going to say lone wolf, but that's not, like at this point, you don't identify as lone wolf, but I'd say there is that spirit, that individual spirit in you that's looking and searching and exploring and creating.
A little part of me still is lone wolf.
Uh-huh.
I am very, very comfortable by myself.
Uh-huh.
And I need a lot of alone time and recharge time. Luckily, I have a partner that understands that I need that. And other people that I'm intimate with in my life. I'm polyamorous, so I have more than one relationship. But it really it matters having somebody who's, you know, understands I need that alone time.
Yeah.
And I often travel alone. I often go to, you know, things alone. I become a little less that way with sex and play events. I tend to like to go with somebody. I have a very good friend, Pup Amp, and I learned the term demisexual from him. And he's, you know, a young Kinkster who knows all the words, and every time I need a question answer, I just ask him. And I said, I don't think I'm demisexual, but lately I feel semi-demi. and by that I mean, I'm less likely to go to a bathhouse alone and just boink a bunch of people that I don't know, but I'm not, it's not unlikely that I'd be with somebody I'm dating or really close to, and we'd go together and do all that together.
Yeah.
That's my semi-demi part.
Uh-huh.
So I'm still a whore, and a slut, but I like a wingman or a co-participant or whatever that might be. So that's why I say I'm semi-demi.
Wow. Okay. Now, speaking of learning new things, dealing with a different generation, I love your show. There's a link right down below. The Old Guard Cigar.
It's on Guard Cigar Salon.
On Guard Cigar Salon.
Yeah.
Okay. And I love that you and 3 other people are talking about issues of aging, of sex, of adapting to new things, learning new things, sexuality, imposter syndrome, boundaries. You guys, whatever it is, you guys cover it, and it's. I love the way you do it. You kind of remind me of like the older gay View, like you know, the View. It would be just. I
like that.
I love this show, so check that out. But I think you often talk about, and you often write about, some of the changes you see, some of the differences you see between the generation that you came of age with and some of the terms and practices of what younger people seem to be dealing with today.
Yeah. So On Guard Cigar Salon started because we are all friends and have been friends. I've known Mr. Christopher since he was 19 years old.
Yeah.
He was seeing a friend of mine back then. And I've known Graylin since forever. And Pig, the other person on the show, is newer. And then, of course, I met Pup Amp, who usually runs camera for us and is also on the show often through Christopher. And we would sit in Amp's backyard, smoke cigars, and we would talk about all these things we're talking about. And one day it was Pig who said, you know, this is kind of like an old French salon, like Paris salon, where they sit around and talk about all these interesting things and in this kind of casual social setting, which is how the name came, the Guard Cigar Salon.
Okay.
And so one day he or Chris, one of us said, we should record this. And that's what came to be. So we do talk a lot about generational differences. Graylin, myself, I'm the oldest. Then I think Graylin and or Pig are close. And then Christopher's still in his 50s, so he's a child compared to some of us. And Amp was quite young. But let me give one example. A very big buzzword now is consent, right? And consent's always been part of leather, kink, gaydom, whatever. It's always been part of it. We just didn't really name it. In leather, we sometimes call it negotiation, which is where the consent part comes in, but we never named consent. We had cues we picked up when we did real-time cruising, which was consent. It just wasn't always verbalized. I could do a look to a guy in a sex club, and I knew whether I could come in or not without ever exchanging a word. That is how we did it. A lot of younger guys now, it's got to be laid out, it's got to be direct, it's got to be whatever. And then there's everything in between. So I think there's a lot of generational differences in how we have sex, our sex culture, our identity culture, all of that, kink. There are big differences between some of the younger people coming into the scene now and my generation.
What are some of the other differences you've witnessed?
They know a lot more stuff now than we did. Let's take BDSM. It was mostly adapted equipment. It was rope. It was kitchen implements for beating implements. The first floggers were actually just leather nailed to a wooden handle. We didn't have these fancy braided handles like they do now. It was just makeshift BDSM for the most part, and that's how you did it. Now, our technical skills were rudimentary. I remember when Tony DeBlas, may he rest in peace, creator of the Leather Pride flag, helped found Leather Archives, was the editor of Drummer magazine for a while, one of the most amazing people I've ever met, taught me how to do a rope harness on a guy at a rope harness.
A rope harness.
Oh, or like a rope, And it was very rudimentary by today's standards, but back then it was groundbreaking.
Wow.
The simple little thing that I put on this body was, by today's rope standards, so simple. And then you see some of these younger guys coming up and they know all these fancy rope techniques and all these ties, and they can suspend people and all these things. We didn't do that back then much. So they're coming into it with a lot more skill, technical skill. I don't think they always have the same interactive skill because they spend so much time online sometimes.
Okay, so what's different? What do you see there?
I think one of the reasons, for example, I think consent needs to be so laid out is they don't have practice cruising in bars. They don't have practice doing the look and the signals and politely taking a hand off your butt and just giving a signal and that's enough. That kind of stuff.
Yeah. They
don't have as much practice with it. So I think that's one of the big differences. But they have way more skill than we did. They are exposed to a lot. There's books and magazines and videos and tutorials and classes, and we didn't have that.
Do you feel like all of that comes at a cost?
Yes, I think it does. I think sometimes technique replaces intimacy. So I will see somebody play with someone because they really know how to do a fancy rope bondage, or they're really technically expert with what we call a single tail whip, or they really know how to play with a butt, or whatever. And they're kind of touted for their technical acumen. And I reverse it. And I'm not saying every young person does this, but I reverse it. And for me, the intimacy is the thing. What we do is very secondary. So I don't go for the physical experience directly as much as the intimacy, and the physical experience comes from that. Even if it's a one-off at a bath, right? That's how I feel.
Right.
And I do see some younger people going for the technical, the look versus the emotional connection, those kinds of things. There's pluses and minuses to everything. So this is not a better or worse, but I do see differences.
Wow. I noticed in a lot of your writing, you sometimes describe there being tension between some of the old guard and newer guard in terms of shared leather spaces.
Yeah.
Some rules and customs are different, and that brings a tension there.
It absolutely does. It is lessening in recent years.
Oh.
It is actually lessening quite a bit. But a lot of older farts like myself, who simply could not get on board with the newer style of leather and kink and fetish.
So what was different?
Guys my age would often bemoan, I walk into the leather bar, it used to be a sea of leather and butch garb and this and that. Now it's all this other stuff. Or I remember when puppies came on the scene, there were a lot of grumpy old men going, what is all these puppies? This is weird. Anything that's new is hard. And there's always that subset of older guys going, get off my lawn. But I've noticed that number of older guys saying get off my lawn is lessening and lessening and lessening. And maybe they're just dropping out of the scene, and that's part of it. And aging out. But I'm seeing less tension, and people are better at mixing. The other thing that everyone is starting to figure out, I think, this is my theory, is the need for both very inclusive spaces and affinity spaces. So there's a time and a place for all the genders, all the orientations, or a subset thereof, all communing in one place and socializing, maybe even playing or whatever, learning from each other, whatever. There's another time when this particular demographic and subset wants to be just with themselves. I had to explain to a heterosexual woman that, you know, in the scene, that I was going to a gay men's event, and she said, "Can I come?" And I went, "No, you cannot. This is gay men's space." I said, and it even flips around. I was, this is many years ago, I was on the East Coast, and an East Coast heterosexual BDSM club board member approached me and said, "We're getting a lot of pressure to ask gays and lesbians to our parties. And there's nothing, we have nothing against gays and lesbians." They said, "But these are heterosexual play parties. That's what they are." And I said, "Stay firm. This is your affinity space. Keep it." I said, "They have theirs. Just, there's a time and a place to mix, and there's a time and a place to be just with the people you want to be with. That often needs to be more private, invite only, things like that, not in public spaces quite as much. But there's a place for both of it, and I think we're figuring that out now. There was a time when everybody's got to be together all the time, and prior to that, everybody had to be separate. Now we've kind of figured out this balance. I can walk into a leather bar and realize it's not all old style gay leather men in leather and butch garb standing there. There's going to be a lot of other people in that bar, and that's okay.
Right.
You know, and
So it can be both and. It doesn't have to be an either or.
oh, absolutely, yeah.
There's room.
And to younger people's credit, I walk in, let's say, full cow, traditional, walk into a bar, and maybe there's 5 guys like me in that bar at the time, and a bunch of younger guys in rubber and pup gear and whatever they're wearing at the time. I've never had a younger people say to me and judge me in any way because of the way I was, but I have seen it the other way around. I've seen older people judge young. I've never witnessed a younger people going, "Oh, that's just archaic, that you shouldn't be dressed that way. That's not how it is now." I've never seen anyone say that. So I give younger people some credit that they accept us older leathermen and kinksters and leather people pretty readily. And I don't really ever feel judged just because my aesthetic and my style and whatever still kind of harkens back to the 70s and 80s, because I like it.
Wow. That's a great insight. I mean, to be able to see that, and it's important.
Yeah,
I really think it does represent the benefits of both and. We don't have to choose. We can have all spaces together and have some designated spaces. And they both are equally valid.
Yeah.
Where I sometimes think, almost like as an outsider, or I referred myself as a purple turkey, which is kind of the same as lone wolf, because I sometimes see what's interesting about leather kink is that sometimes a lot of people that are drawn to that are people who have had to be a lone wolf at some point in their lives. They've had to stand up and assert their individuality, their queerness, at the risk of being rejected or stigmatized, find their voice, find their place, and have used that. They have the wiring, right? That's part of who they are, that's part of who they've had to be. Then enter into a community where there are sometimes some guidelines or rules or standards or written or unwritten ways of being. And sometimes people who have been used to following their own thing don't want to be told what to do or what to wear or where to wear, where they can and can't wear what they want to wear. And that it feels like sometimes that is being played out.
Oh, absolutely. And it's certainly in leather and kink culture, that happens often. I think people are mixing better than they used to. I also recommend people in my age bracket hang out with younger kinksters, younger gay men, younger queers, not just gay men. And I have a lot of queer friends that are they lean heavily on the sexual, but they're very queer. But I really recommend you hang out with some of them. I think it keeps you younger and it keeps you less grumpy.
Yeah.
I do think that it's important for everyone to mix at least occasionally so they understand each other. That said, I am a really big proponent of affinity spaces. There are ways that lesbians interact with other lesbians that is entirely unique to their culture. there are ways gay men interact with each other that are entirely unique to gay male culture. To say about heterosexual, then you have the pansexual community, and they have their own separate culture. And then you demarcate people by. I remember there was a play party for only gay men under 40 here in San Francisco. And the originator of it got a lot of shit in the beginning from older guys like me, like, well, I want to come to your party. And I said, dudes, just chill. They want a space where they have some of people like them and not feel like there's us old guys judging them by how they're playing and how they're dressed and how they're, so let them have their space, their affinity space. And I think we need a lot of that, maybe even more than that than we get. Yeah, I really do. I think we need it. And I think when you have that and you recharge in your own affinity environment, you can go out into the more inclusive mixed spaces and you're better and you're happier and you want more for them. Whereas if you don't do that, you get grumpy because you're not getting what you need.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. Oh my gosh. I really appreciate this and I love this conversation. And I think these messages are really helpful because I think a lot of people are struggling.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of people are struggling,
Yeah.
not only with political turbulence, but just within feeling safe or safer in their own community in terms of their identity, in terms of, do I belong to a community or do I not?
Yeah.
There's so much loneliness in the world. There's so much loneliness and alienation within the queer community.
Yep.
And I think we can be I know that you're a conduit of trying to change that, or at least show people that there's options. There's ways of entering into spaces to be welcomed, to be included.
Let me give an example because it's pertinent. I just wrote about it, which is why it's fresh on my mind. I came back from an event. I don't want to name the event, but a lot of cis gay men and a lot of trans masc men and a lot of non-binary, mostly very masc presenting. And there was some concern by some when the event started to go into that more of a mixed realm. And I got back from the event and I'm like, everyone just fucking got along. And there was just no tension. And we all learned something. And there was even playing going on between people that might not have played before. And it was lovely. It was lovely. And, progress happens slowly sometimes. Evolution happens slowly, but it does. And I think that mixing with different people that you may not fully understand yet, but you should open your mind to understand, keeps you young, keeps you vibrant, and keeps the community interesting. Nothing worse than a stale community. Yeah, I have gone to, and I'm not going to name anybody, or a group of, let's say, gay lettermen who look, act, socialize, play exactly like they did 40 years ago or 30 years ago. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I don't find it as interesting necessarily anymore. I like a little bit of shakeup. And so I think you get that by injecting younger, newer, different kinds of different identities, different ways of playing, socializing, whatever it might be, into the mix. And you can still have your affinity space and just do your thing with your people.
Wow. Okay. That's, thank you. Is there anything I haven't asked you that you want to talk about or let the Tough Talk audience or anything you want people to understand about developing and growing and aging in a healthy way?
I'm going to recommend to anyone who is in my age demographic or approaching it or over it to really stay involved in community on some level. There are younger people who always walk up to me and say, can you tell me what this was like? What's your suggestion about this? Do you have some insight into this? And there is no replacement for a bunch of years on the planet. There just isn't. You do learn things as you go through the decades that you won't learn necessarily in your 20s. It's going to take some time. But they often ask. And if you're not there, we talk about the elder concept, like in gay community or queer community or in leather community, but every community has them, right? And it should just be people that have been around the block, willing to share their lives, their information, their insights in sort of a kind, generous way. And it will just dramatically improve your life if you do that. If you just stay stuck in your own little world, I think it's less interesting.
Yes. So being open, having those conversations, not the get off my lawn mentality of the world, but
Yeah.
opening up. And I'd say, opening up doesn't mean you always have to socialize with a group, or you don't always have to go to the same places.
No,
Just be open to learning, and with the humility of saying, I don't know a lot. There's some things I think I know in this world, some things I know I don't know in this world, and I do want to learn.
And let me add one more thing, and I'm actually including this story in a speech I'm giving on Friday in Tennessee. But I had a random connection with this woman on the corner by my house. She was carrying a yoga mat, and she was about my age, I think. And it turned out she was much older than me, so she was well into her 70s. But she had a yoga mat, so I just said, how was the yoga class? Because there's a yoga studio close by. And she mentioned it was a Pilates class, and it's not at there, it's at another place. And she told me a little about it, and she goes, if you're interested, and she gave me the information. And she began to walk away, and she said, she turned around and she said, I just want to let you know you completely changed my day. The mere fact that you randomly said hello to me and asked me a question and then listened to me, she says, I was depressed. She goes, I'm very depressed about the world situation and the national situation. I have a friend who had a hip replaced, then fell and broke her hip. And I have people in my life that have died, because she's in that age demographic where people around you do die. She goes, I was depressed as fuck. And she basically used that verbiage. I loved her. And she said, you changed that. You in just a few minutes on the corner talking. And that was one more life lesson, to have random conversations, to meet people that aren't necessarily like you, to be present, to just not feel like you don't have things in. I didn't know I had anything in common with this woman. We still text now. I just met her 2 weeks ago. We text every now and then. We read books and things. So, and otherwise I had nothing in common with her, but just connection. So whether it's in leather kink, queer culture, the general culture, I think the more we can do that, the better, because I think we need a lot of that right now. And that's how you build community. Build it 2 people at a time.
On that note, I love that. Thank you. Just a very simple act of kindness, and seeing somebody just randomly, being kind, just acknowledging them can have such an impact. It makes such a difference, especially in a world where people largely often feel unseen, unheard, unacknowledged, unappreciated, and invisible.
Yes.
That we can make such a difference in such a very simple way, just taking a few seconds to ask someone how they're doing.
Yeah, you said that extremely well. Exactly.
So, well, thank you. Thank you for being you. Thank you for creating a pathway for so many of us. Oh, we didn't even talk about, like, you were a big part of getting the pathology out of the DSM.
Yes, I
and
did.
so I'm not. That's another story. So, but my profession is benefited from you directly, because you have been part of a committee that destigmatized that.
Yep.
So your experiences, your writing, your practice, your acknowledging people, your being who you are, your leadership, and it sounds like your upraising has just influenced my world in such a great way. And I probably wouldn't be doing 200 episodes of this show had it not been for your leadership. So I thank you for that.
Thank you. I adore you, and I love what you're doing.
I love what you're doing. If people want to follow you or see you, what's the best way for them to follow your writing, your appearances?
I always tell people, because my website is unfortunately very dormant, so don't go there. I'm working on it right now.
Don't go to it.
But go to any of the socials and look at either for Race Bannon or Bannon Race.
Okay.
That's my handle on almost every social, and they'll find me somewhere.
And if in the future you update or you have sort of a website that has it, let me know and I'll make sure the updates are down below.
It'll be racebannon.com. I own it.
Yeah, thank you. I want to thank everyone who has made Toe Talks possible for the last 200 episodes, the last 4 years. It has been 200 episodes.
That's kind of
200
amazing.
baths now.
And your
very-
skin,
I'm
your
so
skin
clean.
isn't wrinkled or anything. It's perfect.
all the eucalyptus soap. It's really been amazing. I never could have done anything like this till my 50s. And I certainly couldn't have done 200 episodes without a creative, engaged community being part of this, both in the tub and watching the tub. So I'm just humbled and amazed that I've gotten a chance to do this, and we'll continue to do this because I think these messages of community and empowerment and friendship and intimacy, we still need to have more and more conversations and normalize these conversations naked. Now, for some people, naked is very natural. For other people, you wouldn't be comfortable having these conversations naked, but you can still have these conversations with people, or at least just check in like you did with the woman. Just say, how are you? You come from yoga? You having a good day? That's that simple, and it saves lives.
Nudity does help.
It does.
When you break down that external and it's just two naked, but you can communicate and connect with each other in a way that is very different than when you have some sort of armor on.
If don't throw up. But if world leaders had conversations naked, we would be living in a very different world today. People would be thinking and feeling and voting in a very different way if these, in my opinion, if people normalize nudity more often and act accordingly. And I also believe, and people can tell me if I'm wrong, but I know sometimes people go to clubs or spaces and they come home and they feel lonely. I've never heard of anyone going to a naked event or a sex space or a camping area or a social naked space and coming home and feeling feeling lonely afterwards.
I agree.
There's something inherently beautiful about this human connection, and we can continue to have that and create that in our lives.
I agree.
So, thank you for being here.
Thank you for
All
asking
right,
me.
if you like this, subscribe to 200 episodes below. It's that little red button, subscribe, and you get to see going back 4 years to what all these folks are talking about. This has now become my antidote to the news because, like, I watch the news and I feel helpless, but I see 200 people fighting to make this world better in some capacity, and it warms my cockles.
Yeah.
Thank you, Race. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Bye.